Well, I think one of the more surprising things, and this is something that I'm going to be following and blogging about, is some of the reports that have come out of the Pew Research Center. And in these analyses, they're looking at what exactly are people talking about at blogs in this new media ecosystem, whether it's blogs, whether it's independent media, whether it's Twitter, or whether it's Facebook. Where is that content coming from? And in one particular study that they looked at the media ecosystem surrounding Baltimore, Maryland. And in that study, what they found is roughly on average, 90% of the topics that were being talked about at blogs or other independent media originated with traditional news organizations. In particular, either the local newspaper, the Baltimore Sun, or the national newspapers in their online version. That tells me that while a lot of people claim that the traditional media is no longer relevant, in fact, we fundamentally rely upon the traditional media, the role of the traditional journalist as an independent professional news gatherer to inform ourselves, and it's the fabric of what we discuss online. And without the traditional news gathering process, we really wouldn't have a lot of good content. And we wouldn't have a lot of original reporting elsewhere online. The other really interesting thing is more recently they looked at the major blogs, and they looked at an analysis of the major blogs, public affairs related blogs, and they looked at what those blogs are discussing and where their links are going to. In more than 90% of the topics discussed in the links were back to the traditional media. And that's also interesting because people claim now that the blogosphere now has this ability to control the news agenda. Well, that's not necessarily the case. The blogs are still influenced and they're still driven by what's being reported in the New York Times or on the broadcast news or on the cable news networks or political talk radio. It's that they take that content and they sometimes refocus it, they redirect it, they shape that agenda to either be in a certain ideological direction. They might reframe the significance in the information that's being reported on, or they might take the agenda of the traditional media and focus in on just a few topics, whether it's foreign policy, climate change, or a particular political scandal. You know, there's a couple things to think about when you're considering the tendency towards self-selection and self-exposure to different topics and public knowledge. One is that going back 3 or 4 or 5 decades to the 1960s, when we've asked in surveys quiz-like questions about the public's knowledge of the most basic political facts or the basic facts about issues related to science or the environment, inevitably the public scores very low in these fundamental quiz-like surveys about either public affairs literacy or science literacy. So that hasn't changed. And in fact, what we've seen over the last 15 years is that public knowledge and public scores in those types of questions remain relatively stable. It's a question, though, whether that's the best measure of public knowledge or of civic culture. One of the things that we're seeing is actually not necessarily a decline in basic public knowledge, but a real problem at getting public attention and elevating public concern about many different issues. The environment is a great example, or climate change is a great example. And this is a problem really fundamentally of choice. It's the great paradox of the age of engagement, that today we have more information choices about public affairs, politics, science, health, medicine, the environment than any time in history. Yet if you as a consumer of information or as a member of the audience or an individual lack a preference or a motivation to engage with that news and information on a regular basis, you can completely avoid that information. It's not top of mind, and it becomes that much more difficult then to really raise the type of political will necessary to get things done in this country on issues like climate change, immigration, social security, healthcare, you name the public problem.